Russia isn't just physically attacking Ukraine, it is also trying to destroy its culture, language, memory, monuments, works of art, museums, and valuable historical buildings, all of it. That is Ukrainian. It really is a war of civilizations. Good afternoon, my name is Henry Keane, and I will be presenting you a new weekly wrap-up show on Sundays on Freedom TV channel. Putin is delusional and maniacal. He calls Ukraine and Russia one nation while deliberately destroying everything related to Ukraine, meaning, according to his own, destroying his own nation. And that is actually what is going on. When Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine in February, Western countries quickly condemned the invasion and sanctioned Russia's economy and political establishment. But they weren't the only targets. Events, exhibitions and performances featuring Russian artists and cultural figures have been restricted and cancelled throughout the world, although there's no unified movement to cancel Russian culture. In Italy, a course about the work of Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky was cancelled and then reinstated, following a social media backlash. In Netherlands, the Amsterdam Heritage Museum cut ties with its partner, the State Hermitage Museum of St. Petersburg, forcing it to close the exhibition Russian Avant-Garde, Revolution in the Arts. In Wales, the Cardiff Philharmonic Orchestra removed Russian composer Tchaikovsky from its upcoming programme, calling it inappropriate. Some Russians are even taking it upon themselves to remove their own work. At the Venice Biennale, artists Alexandra Sukhareva and Kirill Savchenkov pulled out of the Russian pavilion, saying there is no place for art when citizens of Ukraine are hiding in shelters, when Russian protesters are getting silenced. Right on contrary to Putin's attempts, this war has opened numerous windows of opportunity for the world to get to know everything Ukrainian, and it is being now seen, heard and sold. No matter what you think of the fact, nowadays, Ukraine is the brand personifying fortitude, courage, honor, national dignity and the will for victory. While we, through pain and tragedy, are rediscovering our own culture and being reborn as a nation, Russian culture meets international rejection. Because these days, it is just not about the culture. It isn't about Dostoevsky, Pushkin, and Nabokov. It is about global consequences. Cancelling Russian culture today sends an appropriate worldwide message to other countries.
We are not talking about cancelling Tchaikovsky, but rather about pausing performances of his works until Russia ceases its bloody invasion. Ukrainian culture venues have already done this with him and other Russian composers. We are calling on our allies to do the same. Already, many of the theaters and cultural venues that previously refused to perform Russian music or to cooperate with Russian artists who support the wars have since renewed their ties. Alexander Tkachenko, Ukraine's Minister of Culture, in his article for The Guardian.
For example, there is widespread ambivalence towards the Ukraine war in the African continent. 17 African governments abstained in the UN General Assembly vote condemning Russians' actions. There are quite scholared voices against cancelling Russia's presence in art and culture. They say that limiting access to Russian culture impacts our understanding. Looking beyond the war, the only hope is to restore mutual respect and intercultural dialogue, said Professor Hutchings, citing his sadness that student trips to Russia as part of his university course had been halted. Well, it is only possible to be looking beyond the war if you are not the one actually being shelled, when your family is not the one murdered. More than 400 children in your country are not dead, and you are not sitting in your cold house in the middle of a winter being cut off power for just being Ukrainian, or in Putin words, not Russian enough. If we stop reading, how on earth will we understand what is driving the policies of Russia's elite? Continues Professor Hutchings. It is only by studying Russian history and culture that we can understand where this invasion came from. Well, not really, Professor. As a professor, You should love tests. Well, here's one for you. If it looks like a dog, the Russian elite is 1% pack of Novorishis, wolves that control 99% of Russia's mind-boggling riches. No matter if they read Dostoevsky or citing Pushkin or not, they were, are, and always will be driven solely by the greed, insatiable greed and lust for power. And Doc, answering your question, second question, this invasion has come from where all the invasions in the history of humankind has ever came from the felonious irresponsibility and infantilism of the nation that legitimized the power of thieves and murderers over themselves. Maybe you are right, Professor Hutchings. Highly likely. And Pushkin, Dostoevsky, and Nabokov are not becoming fascists only because fascists are citing them. However, when talking to Ukrainians about the inadmissibility of the cancellation of the Russian culture, what you are really trying to do now, Professor, you are trying to talk sense to people who are being murdered, shelled, whose families are being ruined, while someone is listening to Tchaikovsky. Timeliness, Professor, the key to the castle. Just wait for it. We will look beyond the war when we actually are beyond it, after we win. Then, in time, we just might be ready to be talked sense to. Until then, Professor. There are watchers that are watching things, and doers who just change them. Today, at our Sunday show, we have a special guest from the latter group. He is many things. A war correspondent, author, motivational speaker, a cameraman for Fox News following Oliver North on his travels, and currently he's a war correspondent for Newsmax, who took part in almost all significant modern warfares on the planet.
Vast areas of the country are still almost completely controlled by the Taliban. One bright spot is the growing accuracy of U.S. intelligence gathering. These techniques allow special forces to penetrate remote areas and execute lightning-fast raids in Taliban-held territory. I traveled to western Afghanistan's Herat province, where a special operations task force is fighting the enemy in places where American soldiers have never been before. Accompanied by Afghan commandos, we boarded 3 helicopters in the dead of night at the Special Ops base south of Herat. Then a high-speed, low-level flight deep into enemy territory. The blacked-out choppers dropped the team just outside the village, and within minutes the commandos had it surrounded. A new moon meant almost zero light, making it hard to see even with sophisticated night vision equipment. Some persons of interest were found.
And these days, Chuck Holton is here in Ukraine, again at the very front lines of the events.
This village is only a few miles from the front lines, and it's under fire every day because the strategy the Russians are using is to basically just bomb these towns into submission, terrorize the people into leaving, and then they can move in without any resistance.
We just want peace. We just wish there were no rockets and bombs flying over our heads. We just want peace.
Nobody knows who will be next. It doesn't matter where you are, in Kyiv, in West Ukraine, in Lviv. It doesn't matter. Or here in Frontline, you don't know who will be next.
Mr. Chuck Holton, hello. You're back to Kiev. Thanks for having us here at your apartment in Kiev.
Thanks for being here. Just returned from the area around Zaporizhia. Got a chance to go out to the front lines. My goal was to actually spend the night on the front lines. And
right.
I wasn't able to get actually down into the trenches where I wanted to. It was just too dangerous. So we did the best we could, and we got out to a little town called Orikhiv, which is just maybe 2 kilometers from the Russian lines, and close enough that Orikhiv was being shelled near constantly, about every 30 seconds, the whole time we were there, day and night. Gets worse at night. And then there are some families that are left there in that village. It's mostly abandoned. The city had 20,000 people or so before the war. Now maybe 2,000, and it's virtually destroyed. I mean, almost every building in town has been damaged at least by the shelling. But there are some people who have stayed because they either just don't have any money or anywhere to go, or they're just stubborn, and so they've been living in their basements and cellars there for months now, since June at least, and enduring that hardship. Now that it's getting cold, it's getting more difficult. They are almost exclusively reliant on aid for food and survival. Svetlana has 5 children, and she's been staying in this basement since June. You can see how smoky it is here now because they're using this green firewood to try and keep the place warm. And they're living in a tiny little section of this basement. Why haven't you left and gone somewhere else?
Я хочу на своїй землі.
No, I want to live on my land, my Ukrainian land, and I hope that my city will be delivered soon. We just want peace. We just wish there were no rockets and bombs flying over our heads. We just want peace.
And so some families, the one that I stayed with in particular, have decided to stay there specifically to help the other people who can't leave. So this family serves as sort of a hub for the distribution of aid in Orihyiv. Just 2 weeks ago, there was in Orihyiv there was another center like that was bombed, and a couple of aid workers were killed doing that. So it's very dangerous work.
Nobody knows who will be next. It doesn't matter where you are, in Kyiv, in West Ukraine, in Lviv, it doesn't matter, or here in Frontline, you don't know who will be next.
Our army, Ukrainian army, how are we doing that?
There's quite a bit of fighting around there. I was surprised because in other places where I visited the front lines, in the south at least, it's more of an artillery battle. In this case, I actually heard quite a bit of small arms fire, which means that they're close enough to see each other and shoot at each other. And especially at night, there were quite a few pitched battles where there were a lot of small arms fire. So that says that the amount of fighting down there has picked up. The locals say it has. It's gotten worse, and there's even some rumors now in that area that the Russians are preparing to pull out of Zaporizhia, even of the nuclear plant there, probably because the Ukrainian strategy of hitting their supply lines, making it difficult to maintain life in those areas on the front lines, makes it almost impossible for the Russians to stay. So it's kind of a Pyrrhic victory for them, and they may decide to pull out of the area. But in order to make that more likely, I think the Ukrainians are pushing hard in that area around there to make it more uncomfortable for Russia to stay.
So long-range weaponry from the United States, is it there? I mean, here in Ukraine, is it already working? Or we also had rumors that in the United States there are fears that Ukrainian army is going, once had that weaponry, they're going to shell Russian territory.
That was the fear.
That was the fear.
That was the fear, and that was one reason why they did not provide the long-range ATACMS
ATACMS, exactly.
that Ukraine wanted. Now, in the last 2 days, we've seen Ukrainian-made drones, likely, striking deep inside Russian territory beyond the range of long-range ATACMS. So even if we had given those to Ukraine, now they're striking deeper into Russian territory than even those could reach. So I think that it sort of is a foredrawn conclusion at this point that Ukraine sees it as an absolute necessity that they strike at the bases from which Ukraine is being bombed for inside Russia. Now, also, it's important to point out that the range at which they are striking inside Russia with those Ukrainian-made drones, if that's what they actually are, is beyond the range of the Kremlin. They could reach Moscow from here with those because there's 600, they say it's 600-kilometer range on those things. That changes the game completely.
Completely,
yeah.
Have you actually seen the American weaponry in action there?
What I've seen with my own eyes, the Ukrainians are making very good use of all of the weaponry that they've been provided. I can say that the things that the United States and Western Europe has provided to Ukraine, those things are getting to the places where they need to go, and they are being used in accordance with our game plan, our philosophy. The Ukrainians are absolutely astounding at learning new systems very quickly and putting them to good use, and even modifying them for uses that go beyond what we thought they were capable of. And that's one of the things that I think makes it so valuable for American equipment to be in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are also inventing a whole new way of war. And this is something that will absolutely, if the United States takes advantage of it, it will absolutely change the tactics, techniques, and procedures that the United States uses in battle from now on. They're actually 3D printing their own grenades now out there on the front lines, which is unbelievable. What they're doing now is using drone swarms as area denial platforms. So what they do is they have programs that they're writing here. I mean, these are being created here on the fly inside Ukraine that are enabling swarms of drones to go into an area, basically scan every square inch of that area, and then the next flight they go back, they can scan it again, and if anything has changed, they can find the enemy. If there's a tire track, or if there's a spade of dirt that's been turned over because they're starting to dig fighting positions, it can notice those things from the air, and we can stop them from entering an area before they even get a foothold. That is something that's never happened before. But now with these new drone capabilities, from the sky, they can actually go back in time and they can track where the stuff was coming in from and track it back to its source and bomb that place now. And so it enables them to hit the Russians much deeper into their logistics train, which makes it much safer for large parts of Ukraine, the front line. It's amazing.
Well, there are also rumors that, U.S. military leadership deliberately limits the firing range of HIMARS complexes delivered to Ukraine so that Ukrainian fire does not reach Russian territory?
Okay, so there's two factors that you're talking about. I mean, Ukraine has taken territory right up to the Russian border at this point. True. So they could go north of Kharkiv and go right up to the Russian border and shoot them as into so it's kind of ridiculous that they would limit the range of the attacks they're giving. This is the bigger question, I think. Not what are the capabilities of the HIMARS that are being given to Ukraine. Ukraine is making very good use of those, and they've got plenty, and they could always use more, but they're doing a great job with what they have. They're also being given very good signals intelligence from the United States. Now, this is something that hasn't gotten a lot of press, but the U.S. is providing quite a bit of intel to Ukraine. Ukraine is making amazing use of open source intelligence to do the same thing. So we don't even know what is coming from the US and what's coming from Ukraine at this point, because some idiot Russian soldier posts to TikTok of him dancing around in the front lines, and Ukraine picks that up on TikTok, geolocates that footage, and sends a bomb in there to blow those people up. Wagner Group has lost 2 headquarters that way, in and around Popasna, where they've had a couple of hundred guys probably killed doing that. So all told, I think that Ukraine is being given what it needs to win, but they could be given more and they could win quicker. And that's the real issue. Like, why aren't we giving them Patriot missiles? Why aren't we giving them advanced artillery sensing radars, the radar that is counter battery artillery? And why haven't we given those to the guys on the front lines? They could be killing Russian mortar crews and Russian artillery crews so fast that they wouldn't be able to keep up. But for some reason, the United States seems to be willing to help, but not willing to help enough to really get this over with. And that's the big question I have about the motives of the Biden administration. So I keep telling Ukrainians, don't rely on that. Don't get comfortable with the stuff that you're getting. And they're not. This is the real encouraging thing that I'm seeing is that Ukrainians are taking the initiative. They're starting to build their own weapons. Like, we're not going to wait for long-range ATACMS. We're just going to build our own drones that can fly all the way into Russia and bomb Russia ourselves.
And deeper.
Yeah, and deeper, right. And so that is a very positive sign for Ukraine. And it shows that Ukraine is happy for all the aid it can get, but it's not relying on that aid to win. They're going to do what it takes to win no matter what.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Holton.
Okay.
It was Chuck Holton, not an ordinary person. At age 17, Holton joined the United States Army. Holton is a graduate of both Airborne School and Ranger School. Holton went on to attend Jumpmaster School, Nuclear, Biological and Chemical Warfare School, and Assault Climber School, and was later an instructor at the United States Military Academy. After 4 years of active duty, Holton joined the Wisconsin Army National Guard, where he received training as a helicopter mechanic and eventually became trained as an Air Scout observer. His awards and decorations include the Army Service Ribbon, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Senior Parachutist Badge, Ranger Tab, Expert Infantryman Badge, and Combat Infantryman Badge. So I think this man knows something about the war. It was a weekly wrap-up show. My name is Henry Keane on Freedom TV channel. See you next Sunday. Don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel if you don't want to miss the main information directly from Ukraine.